Have you ever looked at an engine spec sheet and wondered what all those numbers, horsepower, torque, efficiency, really truly mean? Well, they're not just random figures. They're very specific, measurable things. So how do engineers actually figure all this stuff out? Let's dive in and break down the most important ways we measure an engine's performance.
To really get a handle on this, we've got to go deep inside the engine. I'm talking about the cylinder right at the exact moment of combustion. This is where it all begins, where all that potential energy is first unleashed.
So, the very first thing we have to understand is something called indicated power. The easiest way to think about this is as the perfect, ideal, theoretical number. It's the total raw energy created by that tiny explosion of fuel and air inside the cylinder before any of that energy gets lost to friction or anything else. It's the engine's absolute 100% maximum potential. And what I love about this is how logical it is. You don't need to be a math genius to get it. You start with the work done by one single explosion. That's just the pressure pushing the piston down. Then, you simply figure out how many of those power strokes happen every second. You combine them, and boom, work times rate equals power. That's the super intuitive idea behind how we calculate an engine's total potential.
But, there's the theoretical world, and then there's the real world. They're not always the same thing, right? Not all of that initial, raw power actually makes it out of the engine to do something useful. So now we need to connect that potential power to the power that really matters.
And here it is, the key distinction. On one side, you've got indicated power. That's the perfect world, total energy created inside. But on the other side, you have brake power. This is the power that actually survives the journey through all the engine's moving parts and gets delivered to the crankshaft. This is the real, usable power that actually spins the propeller or turns the wheels. So, where did all that missing energy go? Well, it's lost to what we call frictional power. This is the energy the engine has to use up on itself just to overcome the friction of its own pistons, bearings, and gears. You can think of it like an internal tax. It's just the cost of doing business for the engine to even operate.
And that brings us to this incredibly simple but absolutely crucial equation. The total power you start with, your indicated power, minus the power you lose to friction equals the useful power you get out at the end, the brake power. Honestly, if you remember just one formula from this whole explainer, make it this one.
All of this leads us to the hero number, brake power. This is the number that engineers actually measure on a machine called a dynamometer, and it's the horsepower figure you see on a spec sheet for a car or a plane. It is the final, measurable output that tells you how much real work the engine can actually do. Okay, so now we know how to measure an engine's raw power. But pure muscle isn't everything. A question that's just as important is, how efficiently does it actually produce that power? The first way we measure that is with mechanical efficiency. It's a really simple ratio of the power that gets out versus the power that was put in. So brake power divided by indicated power. It gives you a percentage, kind of like a grade on a report card, that tells you how good the engine is at overcoming its own internal friction. A higher number is always better. Next up is a really important one, especially for four-stroke engines, volumetric efficiency. You see, an engine makes power by burning fuel, but you can't burn fuel without air. So this metric tells us how good the engine is at sucking that crucial air into the cylinder. It's a comparison of how much air it actually breathes in versus the total space available inside.
And I love this quote from the source material because it's just the perfect analogy. Volumetric efficiency indicates the breathing ability of the engine. Think about it. An engine with a great design can take a deep, full breath of air every single time, and that lets it make more power. A bad design, well, that's like trying to run a marathon while breathing through a tiny straw.
Now we get to what might just be the most important efficiency metric of all, thermal efficiency. This tells us how much of the heat energy from that burning fuel gets converted into useful work that actually pushes the piston down. All the rest is just loss as waste heat, out the exhaust pipe, into the cooling system. So a higher thermal efficiency means you're squeezing more power out of every single drop of fuel.
All right, let's round out our little tour of the engine spec sheet with a couple other key metrics that engineers live and die by.
First up is something called mean effective pressure, or MEP. Now this sounds a little technical, but it's a really brilliant tool. It's a calculated, sort of imaginary average pressure that lets us compare totally different engines, big or small, on a level playing field. It basically tells you how hard an engine's cylinders are working, no matter their size. And here's a metric that directly impacts your wallet: specific fuel consumption. This tells you exactly how much fuel the engine has to burn to produce 1 unit of power for 1 hour. Now here's the key thing. Unlike miles per gallon in your car, for SFC, a lower number is better. A low SSC means your engine is sipping fuel, not guzzling it.
So here's a quick look at everything we've covered all in one place. We've gone on this journey from the raw theoretical potential inside the cylinder, that's indicated power, all the way to the real-world usable output at the crankshaft, brake power. And we've seen how all those different efficiency numbers tell the rest of the story about how well an engine is really doing its job.
So I'll just leave you with this little puzzle. Imagine you're the engineer. You're designing a drone for a long cross-country flight. What's more important? The sheer muscle of high brake power, or the marathon-running stamina of a low specific fuel consumption? The answer to that question really gets to the heart of the trade-offs that drive all of engine design.